Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another segment of SABOR Connect, where we connect you to important topics around the real estate industry. I'm your host, Gilbert Gonzalez, CEO of the San Antonio Board of Realtors. Given the growing number of agents operating from remote locations and interacting with clients via email and text, it is essential to verify the identities of potential clients to avoid seller and title fraud. To tell us more about this fraud and to provide tips on how we can prevent it, Jeremy Brewer, SABOR's Vice President of Risk Management and General Counsel, will join us today. Jeremy, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Let's start off with, how would you define seller fraud, title fraud?
Seller fraud, title fraud is typically, you can boil it down to, it's just seller ID theft, or it's just ID theft, really what it boils down to. It's somebody who's contacting a realtor or contacting somebody trying to get money by stealing the identity of the actual seller. So usually these things are rarely about property. Property rarely ever transacts. In fact, Texas case law indicates that a forged deed is a void deed. So the property wouldn't necessarily transact, but the seller ID theft or the identity theft of the seller is about getting that money and somebody fraudulently trying to take advantage of a buyer to secure large sums of cash.
So you've kind of given a couple of examples, but are there any other types of examples that you have either received phone calls or talked to consumers or realtors about that are something what it looks like?
Sure. So a lot of times these things, the ID theft that we're talking about now usually is around a realtor may get a call or get a text from somebody saying, hey, I have this property and I want to sell this property. They may say, hey, I got your information off of online or your information from some source, and to build some kind of credibility. Typically the properties that they're looking at, or the properties that are the subject properties of these transactions, are usually non-owner occupied, or they are rural properties where there's less of a likelihood that the actual owner is going to be present or engaged soon in the transaction. So that's the typical situation that you would see in these circumstances. You might also get, people may remember a couple of years ago, there was a lot of ID theft surrounding, changes in title instructions where hackers would contact buyers or contact realtors and say, hey, here's a change in the title instructions, rather than send your wiring your $250,000 to the title company or to the bank or to whomever, wire it to this new account. And so that's another type of ID theft that is commonly associated in this type of realm.
Okay, so I am a consumer, I am a home buyer. What are some red flags I should be looking for to know, oh, I should call somebody?
So typically they won't necessarily contact the consumer. So usually they usually will contact a realtor, and they'll usually say things like, hey, I got this property, I want to sell it, I want you to sell it, you look like you're really good to do this. It's worth $150,000, but I'm willing to sell it for $100,000 if we can get it done quick. I got some, it may be, a lot of times it'll be things like, I have a family member that's sick that I need the money for, or I'm out of the area, I don't live in the area, and so there's and I just need the money fast. And so another thing that may pop up during the transaction is the seller or potential seller may accept large concessions, like a buyer, somebody may solicit or buy the property or to buy the property, and they may say, well, I want a $20,000 concession, and the seller in this circumstance may say, hey, that's great, that's no problem. They don't bat an eye, they don't have any issue with it. They're just like, as long as we can close fast, I don't care.
So we keep saying seller, but we really should just be saying fake seller.
Fraudster, probably.
Right, because it's not the seller. That's the point, is these are people pretending like they own the property.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So if I am a home buyer, are there any red flags or any things I should be looking out for? Or are they pretty much the same for consumers as well as for the realtors?
Things that home buyers can look for is somebody putting a sign in your yard that is for sale. Somebody showing up to survey. I've heard of surveyors come up to survey the property, and the home inspectors coming up to inspect the property. Usually that's way deep into the transaction. Getting on the front end and getting up closer to the beginning of the transaction is more complicated for the potential victim in these situations, because the buyer doesn't know. All they know is that their agent presented them this property and they like it. The seller rarely is going to know, because absent some kind of overaction, they don't even know that this is even happening. So so there's usually not much they can do at the beginning of the transaction, but if they get, a little further in, then, they could be aware that my house actually isn't for sale.
So realtors are in a strong position to help avoid these situations, and they have certain tools available to them. What are some things that you would recommend realtors do as a matter of due diligence to help avoid fraud?
Sure. So realtors can actually have quite a bit of tools available to them. Just takes a little bit of effort, really. They can either go down to the county, they could search the county deed records to make sure that the actual person who's contacted them is the record owner of the property. They can meet the person at the property, meet the fake seller at the property. Usually that won't happen because they're not usually here. They're usually remote, either in another area of the country or maybe in another country altogether. They can work with the title company to do a quick rundown title search to make sure that the actual person who they're talking to is named on the deed or named somewhere in the deed documents. Or, they can use tools like Forewarn to input the seller's information or the fake seller's information into Forewarn in the Forewarn app to determine that person's connection with the property. All these things kind of would allow a realtor to be more aware. And there's not anything you think you could do that could completely eliminate the opportunity or the risk, because technology, while it can be a great mitigator, it's also one of the great causes. The reason this is on the rise is because the ability to get a fake, technology's ability to create fake notary stamps, to modify deed records and modify county instruments, to make it easier for someone to pretend to be somebody that they're not, and harder to discover that. So it's on the rise because of those things, but technology is also the best tool, I think, to combat those things as well.
So it does happen. Somebody is defrauded. Both the realtor and the consumer, who should they go to for help?
So typically, when you say defraud, you want to make sure that, like I said, the properties in these transactions rarely close. Somewhere they get hit up or they get stopped. If there's a title company, they almost always get stopped. But the title company isn't usually looking for this on the front end. So the risk of losing property is low, or risk of actually, having that property lost. The risk of spending a ton of money to undo this, like any ID theft situation, is really, really high. So if a buyer is, a victim of this type of transaction, and say the buyer has delivered money, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to the fake seller, they can contact the police, they can contact the local authorities, the sheriff, the police department, they can contact the FBI, they can contact their attorney to figure out what are the remedies available to them in this type of situation.
Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers?
Yeah. This doesn't take a whole lot of input or effort to try and avoid on the front end. I mean, if somebody calls you, there are tools out there and technology to verify somebody who's calling you to make sure that they are actually the person who can represent the owner of the property, or who is the owner of the property. An ounce of prevention is going to be worth a pound of cure in this situation. So you're really going to have just doing these small little steps, while maybe concerning to you on the front end, you may be the risk, maybe this person, you may lose the deal because this person may not be, but you don't want to deal where someone who doesn't own the property is trying to sell the property. So it's probably a good deal to lose. But
it's not a real deal.
It's true.
So you're not losing anything.
Technically, you're not.
Yeah.
You're losing the headache down the line.
Yeah.
So, there's just these little things would actually help a realtor quite a bit in the long run.
Excellent. Jeremy, thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching SABOR Connect. Thank you for watching SABOR Connect. For more episodes and other SABOR videos, visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/SA Board of Realtors. This episode is sponsored by ShowingTime, Supra, ListTrack, and CRS Data. To learn more about how they can help you in your business, head to sabor.com.